And also,
Oh, Woody, you're here. I didn't think you'd show up. I don't have time to do everything. I asked Woody if you wanted to have a conversation about the election. Do you want to maybe do it on Sunday? Do you have time on Sunday? My stream said that you needed some backup. That you're vastly outnumbered on PKA. So I thought we would join up. You do have time on Sunday? Let's do it on Sunday. If you wanna set a specific time, we can do that. Or we can just let the stream decide. What do you guys want? Chiz is in here too. There we go. All right, stream. Should we review this debate or should we have a conversation with Woody about the elections? What do you guys want to do? Well, it's basically unanimous. All right. So yeah, if you want to hop in the Discord now, we can do it. If you type !Discord, then you can click on that link and then you can just jump in like the waiting room or any of the public rooms and I can pull you up. It's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. Somebody already did !Discord. So if you just scroll up a couple and there's a Nightbot right there, it's just discord.gg/Hutch. You're good to go. PKA, man, has been doing its thing now for fucking how many years? 14 years? Like, how many podcasts can say they've been going for 14 fucking years? Kind of insane. It doesn't matter if it's uppercase or lowercase, as far as I understand. You just click on that, and then you click on, like, waiting room or change my mind. And then I pull you up into the live channel. That's how you do it. There he is. Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let me mute your stream. All
right. I can barely hear you.
Stand by. Huh. Okay, I turned my volume up a bit. Did that help?
It helped a little bit. Can you just do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4?
Sure. I turned my gain up a little bit more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Should be good. Chat, you guys can hear
good.
him, right? Okay, they can hear you just fine.
Cool,
What's up, man?
Cool. How you doing, man? We lost, brother.
We did. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. My chat was saying that you were in it a little bit, so I thought maybe you'd want to commiserate.
Yeah, I've been trying to look how tall Colin is. I'm thinking I'm on camera. He walked behind me. My son is 6'3" now. He's like your height.
Oh my goodness, Jesus,
freaking wild.
Well, you're pretty tall too, right?
I'm 6 foot. I think you're a good bit taller than me.
No, yeah, but just about 6'3", barely 6'3", I think is what I am.
Yeah. That feels, the difference is huge, Hutch. So people don't know my son's autistic. I think that some of you know me. And so that means that even though he's 21 now, he still like hugs and stuff more than maybe most people do, like adult relationships. I am so beta. I'm like putting my head on his collarbones. It's like the girl in this relationship. That's what's up.
Nice.
But in terms of election stuff, yeah, we lost. I have had this frustration that, to me anyway, the Republicans have kind of been, I don't know, fighting against ghosts and false nonsense the whole time. Shucks, critical race theory in Virginia. We've talked about that one before. It worked for them to act as if Democrats wanted to teach some sort of racism or reverse racism in schools, and they won an election on it. This time, why did the Republicans really win? Was it because they hate trans people? Was it because they hate brown people? Was it because they're convinced that the economy is an absolute shambles and things are terrible? This same economy would be something that they celebrate under Trump, but under Biden, it was a nightmare, right? And now that they've won, I feel like they're still pushing falsehoods, and I just don't want to live in the falsehood thing. The falsehood now is the mandate. It's the overwhelming, sweeping majority. Listen, they got less than 50% of the voters, right? They won, but they won by 1.7%, if my number's right. It's something close to that.
Still going down, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a margin of victory that they are acting like was an absolute butt kicking, a stomping, a realignment of American politics, 1.7%. When they lost by 4.4% to Biden, did they act as if they absolutely got their clocks cleaned? When they lost for 3 election cycles in a row, they didn't sort of admit that reality. And now that they win, they exaggerate their reality. And I find that frustrating, but here we are.
Did you want to turn your camera on? Because I can put you on the screen as well.
Sure. Stand by.
So the people can see your face. You got ripped, you guys. Are you still ripped, by the way?
I'm not always ripped. I'm pretty good right now. I have even my haters would be like, those are visible abs. But it's not always this good.
Okay, hold on. How do I figure this out? So now I do pop out, put it down there, that, and then we do it like, that's fine. Yeah, well, so for Virginia, was it critical race theory that lost the Democrat the election, or was it Ralph Northam being, because that was Northam's race that he lost, right?
I forget the losing candidate from the Democrat side. Probably.
You were talking about bullshit, and there was a quote that Northam gave a radio host about a third trimester abortion that they've been running on for the last like 5 years, and it's complete bullshit. So if you take the quote completely out of context, then it sounds like he's saying you just take a regular baby and just like let it die on a gurney, or I guess kill it with an ice pick in their minds. And he was talking about providing palliative care to non-viable fetuses. And when you see the whole context of the quote, it's really obvious that that's what he was talking about. That's actually where the post-birth abortion thing came from to begin with. And yeah, you're right. It's difficult to, it's difficult to, like, I don't really know how to react to this moment just yet. I don't really know how to course correct just yet, because when we look at some of the polls that I've seen like multiple polls that show that people who are more engaged with politics voted for Kamala. People who are better informed about the state of the country voted for Kamala. So people that understood that crime has been going down on Biden's watch overwhelmingly went for Kamala. People that thought it was going up went for Trump. People that thought that the economy, that we were in a recession, that was another question. And the people who said, yes, we're in a recession, we're not. Obviously, they swung for Trump, and people who said that we're not in a recession voted for Kamala. And so it's difficult to, like, everybody wants to give their hot takes, and there are, you know, there are a lot of voices in the left-wing space right now that are giving their 2 cents about what Kamala should have done. If you listen to the progressives, she should have run on Medicare for all and promised everybody a $25 an hour minimum wage and did an arms embargo against Israel. And if she would have done those things, it would have been a 49 state landslide like Reagan and Mondale. And if you listen to, you know, some of the more establishment types like Axelrod and a couple others, maybe Carville, they're going to tell you, like, we got to get away from the trans stuff. And so it's kind of frustrating because honestly, at this point, we don't really have like a ton of really good data. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Where do you stand on the Destiny kind of spoke for me. He's like on the trans stuff and on some of the less popular sort of further left positions. He said this: we can win without you, but we can't win with you. And I was like, wow, that's kind of where I come from. In my opinion, trans people, listen, you guys are splendid, right? I love your zesty asses. I have no issues whatsoever. My problem is that if you're the face of the Democratic Party,
I'm listening. I'm just gonna
win.
I'm listening. I'm just gonna get my fan turned.
It's hard to win popularity contests if we put trans people is sort of like front and center on the cover of this book that represents the Democratic Party. And again, to Destiny's point, like we can win without you, but we can't win with you. Trump has proven that you can win with just your base if you motivate your base. I understand the temptation of every politician to make their tent as big as possible, to include everybody. And I certainly don't want to kick them out, but gosh, we have a branding problem. We seem to be the party that puts biological men in girl sports. And that is a very small issue, but a super unpopular position. I don't even like it.
Destiny was saying we can win with sorry, say that again. Was he talking specifically about trans people?
I think so, but I might be misquoting him. But what he said was, we can win without you, but we can't win with you. And this is like the notion that the Democratic Party needs to take some of its less popular positions and put them on, the back burner, on the bottom shelf. It doesn't mean they don't belong in our store. And I'm just not a hater for trans people or gay people or whatever. But when we're talking about pride parades, if that's on the cover of our book, if that's our branding, we're going to lose popularity contests.
I struggle with this because I think you can have a nuanced debate about like trans people in sports once we get to the collegiate level, once we get to the professional level and the Olympics and to my understanding, the states don't regulate these agencies. Like they come up with their own sort of set of guidelines for how to move forward with these things. Mm-hmm. I guess that the reason I struggle is because I feel like there's not really a great answer. Like there's only just like the less bad answer for how to deal with the issue. I'm just going to try to set you up better on my screen here. Just one second.
Okay. Yeah. You mentioned like the reality of what government actually does about trans people. And it's very little, right? I'm not working in reality. I'm working in perception. It's the perception that I'm trying to deal with and fix so that we can win elections. And I don't know. The Republicans I think they made a mistake with some of their pro-life choices. I understand that's their principles and I'm cool with it. But if you make like anti-abortion the center of your campaign, it's going to be hard to win a popularity contest. Democrats have some unpopular positions too, and I just need them to stop putting them front and center. I think that's part of the reason we lost.
You mean, so when you say unpopular, you specifically mean trans kids in sports or trans people in sports generally?
Or trans issues in general. Like, I think that if the debate is whether or not biological men can use women's bathrooms, we're losing. My answer is yes, right? Whatever's less disruptive. I don't know. There's no victims here, but whatever is less disruptive is where I stand. But my gosh, I wish we were talking about the economy. I wish we were talking about the jobs program. I wish we were talking about healthy school lunches, things the government actually does. The things the government doesn't do, like bathroom regulation, that shouldn't be what we're talking about. And if we are, then the other side has defined the debate and we're going to lose.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to just throw trans people under the bus. I don't know if that's what you're suggesting, but like, are you familiar with the governor of Utah? His last name is Cox, C-O-X.
No.
Sounds
sexy.
He's a hardcore Mormon guy, big religious guy, and he was sort of like rebuking Trump a little bit, and then he kind of kissed the knee right before the election because I figured he needed his support to win, which is just increasingly becoming the case. But the Utah legislature passed this bill to ban trans kids from competing in sports, and he vetoed the bill. And it was a really surprising move. And he came out with this letter. I think it's only like a page or two long. Really beautifully written letter where he talked about how he basically, just to sum it up, he said there are a total of 3 trans kids competing in sports in the entire state of Utah. One of them is a trans girl. The other 2 are trans boys. And he talked about how he doesn't understand what it's like to be trans, but he recognizes that they are the most at-risk group in the entire country and maybe in the entire world for suicidality. And he summed it up with the very last line. He said, "I just want these kids to live." And I thought it was really, really beautiful. And it was a rare moment of political courage The legislature ended up overriding his veto because they had the votes to do that. But that's kind of where I'm at with that. Like, I don't think that, like, I think we can have a healthy, robust debate about stuff like puberty blockers. And if I'm agnostic on this stuff, so if some scientific study comes back and demonstrates that there's like significant risk, and that puts them at 5,000% more risk for cancer, and these, and I understand that that's what they're doing in some of these European countries, then I would be open to, like, I go wherever the data goes. I go wherever the science goes, and I'm not the one researching these things, so I defer to people who are more educated on these matters. But I don't know
in terms of policy. I think we agree. I think my problem with biological boys and girls sports is I feel like there's a victim in that. Even if it's track and field, like make it a non-contact thing. There's some girl who worked really hard, who's actually the best biological female in her state, who didn't get a gold medal because of that. And that feels yucky to me. I have a hard time.
Was this college level?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking of a high school thing, and it was in Texas, and it was like 10 years ago, I think. So, but there, and if you look at this girl, she totally vibes guy. Like she's strong. And anyway, what I'm really focused on, because I find the issue complicated, and I don't know the best answer all the time. These are hard, but I do think that in terms of winning popularity contests, we're going the wrong way by, maybe this phrase isn't working, putting it on the cover of our book, right? Something that belongs in chapter 21, buried in the back third somewhere, is on the cover of our book, and it's making us lose elections.
I don't feel like it's on the cover of our book. I think Republicans are putting it on the cover of our book, but I don't think
successfully. Right.
But I haven't seen a lot of, in fact, I haven't seen any Democrats out there making trans issues, like, especially in 2024, when so many Democrats across the country were kind of pivoting to the center because the electorate broadly had moved right on a number of issues. Like, we tracked it, we could see, like, people were especially like on immigration stuff. But
I'd argue the Republicans were successful in making defund the police the cover of our book for some period of time.
Yeah.
And Biden specifically said, no, fund the police.
And he did.
Until he got that message out well enough.
And he did. He did. In the legislation, they gave out hundreds of millions of dollars to states to disperse to law enforcement. Yeah.
I wish there was some way we could also reverse the narrative on the trans issue that they've thrust upon us, only semi-accurately, right? Like, we are the party that's nice to trans people, and I do like that, but I feel like our identity is that of, like, I don't know, the ostracized, the cast outs, the island of broken toys, whereas Trump is the cool kids. And who's voting for the island of broken toys? Misfit toys, that's the term.
I understand the concern. I guess I hesitate to, what I wouldn't want to see is for the Democratic Party to throw them under the bush, throw them under the bus, and then we get another Trump presidency, and that galvanizes a lot of, like, progressive and left-wing action in this country, and then it becomes like a losing issue for Republicans in 3 years, and then we're going to look back and be like, well, the party just threw them under the bus like 3 years ago, so how much credibility do we have here? So I don't really know the answer to these questions. Like, some people talk about doing like a trans-only league, and that just doesn't seem tenable because that'd be like 5 people in the Midwest,
right?
Like, trying to do a league. It's a difficult thing to try to tackle. Yeah,
I think you strawman me a little bit in this, like, throw them under the bus. That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm like, can we just get them off the cover? Can we just, when there's a Democratic rally, it shouldn't be Palestinian flags, LGBTQ flags, trans issues, and like all this stuff. This is the loudest part of the blue party. And I'd rather the loudest part of the blue party be pro-union. That might win.
Did you see a lot of, like, trans flag and Palestinian flags and rainbow flags at the DNC? I didn't see any.
I would argue that anti-Israeli protesters were making a scene and a ruckus on college. They were making Jewish students feel unsafe, and they were never really chastised by the blue team.
Wait, no, that's not true, though.
Tent. They all belong here. Maybe I misread the vibe, but perception is really the focus of this, and I can't be the only one that misread this vibe.
So I'm with you on the college protests. I think if you're doing peaceful protests, that's one thing. I think if you're even breaking laws, as long as it's like not violent, I think there's a place for that too. There's civil disobedience has a rich history in this country. But what we saw on a lot of these campuses was pro-Palestinian students literally physically blocking people from entering spaces, which was totally unacceptable to me. And on the very, very extreme end, you saw, you know, they took over an entire building. They literally held like 2 janitors hostage inadvertently at the was it oh God, Columbia, I think. When they took over a building, there were 2 janitors in the building cleaning, and they were like, let me out. And at first they said no. And then there was a physical altercation between the janitor and these students. And then you also saw
Democratic thought leaders, the Kamalas, the Obamas get behind a podium and say, no, this isn't how we do this.
No, but they did though. Biden even criticized the protests. We saw tons of mainstream Democratic politicians like Fetterman and Richie Torres and a lot of people in the Democratic Party were saying like these protests are just completely unacceptable. And they passed a measure. They passed a bill in the House. They passed a bill through the Congress.
Please, I'm on call. Sorry, Hutch.
Oh, that's good. They passed a bill in the Congress that was supported by like I think most Democrats supported the bill that I don't know what it did with protests, but it had to do with it was directly in response to the protests. And so I don't know what media ecosystem.
I accept that. I'll hit that back in a second. So I accept that I sound like I'm wrong on this, and I gather that. Still, the fact that I'm wrong, I feel like I'm not the only person who's wrong on this. Like if they did push back on these protests on campus, then they needed to do it in such a way that it got to me, because I'm a news junkie and I actively try to consume both sides and not be in a bubble. I don't know that I'm successful, but I try. And it didn't really get to me somehow that the Democrats put their foot down regarding the anti-Israel or pro-Palestinian protests. To me, that was, I don't want to make anyone mad. We're trying to carry Michigan. That was the vibe I took from it.
I would suggest after we're done, like look up, you know, Democrats condemn student protests. You're going to see plenty of examples of mainstream Democrats pushing back against the more extreme elements. Like obviously if it's peaceful protests, even if you disagree, then I feel like as Americans, we should support that. But when it came to physically blocking people or engaging in violence, taking people's signs, ripping people's Israeli flags,
even the intimidation. Yeah, I've just seen, 3 versus 1 kind of making a guy feel like if he goes this way, it won't be okay.
Yeah.
Did they do anything? Not exactly anything, but
no, there's an implicit threat of violence there, and it's totally unacceptable. Yeah. I used to get in arguments with some of the more progressive people in my chat about this topic, and so like I'm right there with you. I don't disagree. I think that there's a couple things going on here. Number one, I just feel like there's right now in right-wing spaces, both in terms of mainstream media, when we're talking about Newsmax, OAN, Fox, and especially alternative media, there are no standards whatsoever. Like none. You can say whatever the fuck, and the people who consume that news, if you get something wrong, they don't care. They really don't care.
Right. That's one of my biggest frustrations, right? It should be embarrassing when you're wrong, like I was 90 seconds ago, right? Like it should be a problem, but they're completely okay with it. And even when proven wrong, they'll hit it back with stuff like, yeah, okay, maybe that wasn't right. But things like that are right, and no mind has been changed. And that contributes to this thing where Kamala and Trump were taking a different test, right? Kamala's taking this AP Calc exam, while Trump is taking a remedial math exam, and they're like, where are the details on her plans, right? They always, no matter how many details she gave, she didn't have enough. Trump, on the other hand, would say, healthcare, I'm going to give you a big, beautiful healthcare plan. It's going to be so great, you're going to love it. Right. That was it. Big, beautiful are all the details he needs to provide. Meanwhile, on her side, she needs a 518-page bill for them to be satisfied. How can we take the same test?
All of this is valid. I understand that, but I think we're overcomplicating something here. I think the reason why Kamala lost is because voters blamed Biden for inflation, and she inherited the blame, and they remembered the Trump years as being more prosperous, despite the fact that the last year was fucking insane with COVID, obviously, which a lot of that was out of his control. A lot of that was him being incompetent. But that's what I've seen in survey after survey after survey, is that the concerns about the economy was top of mind for all of these voters in swing states. And so then it makes it, I feel like when you have that out there in the zeitgeist, when you have it out there in the culture that they're mad at the incumbent party because inflation got really high in 2022 and 2023, it's easier to win the culture war stuff. Like it makes the trans stuff and the immigration stuff more salient when people are stretching their paychecks in ways that they weren't like 2 years ago. And I don't know if you know this, but this is the first time since the immediate post World War II era. This is the first time since then that every single incumbent party in the world lost seats. Every single one. And so it's not difficult to understand why. I mean, inflation wasn't specific to the United States. In fact, it was worse in most other places. And typically when there is some kind of economic downturn, they vote against the people who are in charge. And so I think that is largely what drove this election. I think the data shows that right now too.
A lot of those are great points. We still have a perception problem. And I wish the Democrats were better at solving it. If there's one thing, I don't think the Republicans govern particularly well. When we saw Trump, what was the turnover rate of his cabinet? It's heckin' wild, right? And what happened to unemployment during the COVID years? What happened to his response? How badly did Trump bungle COVID? And he did it for narcissistic, self-serving reasons. He intentionally didn't want people to wear masks, for example, because he felt like they would reflect badly on his election chances, that they would be a reminder to people, a visible reminder. So instead, he just divides, doesn't care about people's health in reality. He only cares about perception. But the Democrats, I could argue the economy, right? Inflation went back down. Unemployment had been below 4% for so heckin' long. The stock market, if the stock market did under Trump what it did under Biden, he'd have been bragging about it constantly, right? We crossed 40,000 in the Dow.
He tries to take credit for it now because it's like, well, the people anticipate that I'm going to come back. And so.
Right. He did that the last time too in 2015, but, or I guess 16, doesn't matter. But, so even if the facts are on the Democrat side, that should make it easy for them to get perception on their side. And for some reason, they can't do it. Who do we need? Do we need Jon Stewart? Is he a guy who can sell himself? Because Kamala couldn't do it. And would Shapiro have been better? Would Buttigieg? I'm a Buttigieg fan. There's half dozens of us who think that Buttigieg is the guy who can
No, there's lots. No. He a lot of people recognize that he is a unique talent when it comes to engaging with conservatives and defending the Democratic Party. He's one of a kind, really. I think he's the best out there right now.
I've become this debate bro sycophant, right? Like, I'm the biggest Destiny fan you'll find. And it's not that I line up with every position he holds. It's that I'm very impressed by what he does. Like, I'm like, dude, I get 2v1 every week. Could you just give me some tools, so that I can be half a Destiny on this thing? That debate bro archetype that has come out, I'm super duper impressed with it. He was just gifted with that mind, I can only assume, and practiced. But, we need a guy like that, like Buttigieg, who can go and be the Fox News whisperer and change minds.
I don't know if it's going to be him, because I have, to be honest with you right now, I feel pretty jaded and I have serious doubts that this country would elect a gay man after this last election, and especially with the electorate moving right. But I also think it's too early to make any kind of like prognostications or any kind of predictions for what the party needs in 2028, because we just don't know what the landscape's going to look like. So much of what happens in the midterms in 2026 and in 2028 depends on what happens with Trump's presidency. I think we need to be dynamic and react to things as they happen. And like right now we're in just a bit of a holding pattern. So we just have to wait to see like what he does, and more importantly, how the Americans respond. Because it's entirely possible that he does mass deportation and his approval rating goes up. I'm internally preparing for that possibility.
I hadn't considered that. I thought for sure we'd see National Guard people in uniforms with M16s strapped to their shoulders, walking the streets in a way that America's not accustomed to, and it would be an unpopular sight, but we'll see. What are the parts of the Trump administration that you're looking forward to? Does he have anything that you see? I've been looking for silver linings, and I think they exist.
Stumped, huh? Well, like for example, Cenk interacted with Don Jr. and are you familiar with Cenk, by the way?
Yeah.
He interacted with Don Jr. and Elon yesterday. I think in a way that made him look quite naive. But if we just take what Elon and Don Jr. say at face value, which I don't think you should, but let's just say we take it at face value. They brought up the possibility of doing a ban on people leaving like the military sector and going straight into like consulting gigs. I think there could be some value there. I think to the extent that like RFK could maybe like ban things that are actually like bad for you, then maybe we can see an increase of health. But I just have so many I have so many doubts about the whole thing, because he's talking about, for example, getting rid of red dye in foods, getting rid of corn syrup and replacing it with cane sugar. And it's like, dude, that is not going to fix the problem. There are just as many calories in cane sugar as there are in corn syrup. And the red dye, there's no proof that this is like doing any kind of like serious harm to people's bodies or anything. So to the extent that he's successful at making people lose weight, it's going to be because the prices of these products like go up 30 or 40% and people just buy it less because they can't afford it. Because it's going to cost more to manufacture it.
There's so much I don't know about this issue. RFK is one of the ones where I have hope for, and I think it's naive. I know it's naive. I get it, right? We have a science denier, a guy who wrote a book saying there's no vaccines that are safe, in charge of the FDA. This isn't a good thing. But he's also a fitness buff, and I do wonder why processed foods are so much cheaper. I do wonder why processed foods are so prevalent, right? Like, what is going on there? I had a friend back in the 90s. This guy smoked more pot than you're guessing right now. And he had like an ounce of pot in his palm. And he's like, look at this. This is 1 ounce. And I forget what it was, but I'll call it like $200. And then he had in his other hand like 12 ounces of prepackaged cookie, right? In a plastic wrapper. And he's like, this thing has 37 ingredients. It has riboflavin and a handful of things we can't pronounce. It's been shipped. It's been cooked. It's been baked. And like, this is a complicated thing, this cookie that exists on a shelf for 6 years. Why is it so much? It was 48 cents back in the 90s, right? Why is it so much cheaper than pot? What is happening here? And I don't know if this analogy is hitting home, but why are these processed foods, these weird things that come in plastic bags, so cheap and so plentiful, right? I think maybe our farming system is poorly incentivized, that there's something to these monoculture corn fields that exist across the entire Midwest that is being subsidized and incentivized and becomes the basis of all of our food. Maybe we can do better and have healthy foods with fewer ingredients that you're familiar with, like flour and sugar.
Well, I'm just saying there's a price to pay for that. The cost of these goods are going to go up. The reason why it's cheaper is because it's cheaper to manufacture these products using these preservatives and extra processed foods and stuff like that.
Is it?
It's just cheaper to do.
Why is the extra processing cheaper? I get that it stores better. That's a part of it, right? But my goodness, is this the whole... Someone wrote, fuck this guy, I want my Doritos. Okay, tip of the hat, I see where you're coming from. But why are Doritos so cheap? I feel like they're subsidized. Why are Doritos so cheap? That's a complex food compared to like a ham sandwich or something. And ham's complicated, but it's cheaper than a tomato. Why are tomatoes so expensive? Why does it work this way?
I mean, we have organic products and they cost more. So, I mean, you can buy organic products now. You can go out of your way to make sure that you're not eating processed foods. It just costs more. And so I don't know if Republicans, and I don't know if like Republican voters specifically, people who supported Trump, are necessarily gonna like that. Like they see this guy who's like 72 years old and he's in relatively good shape, right? We're looking at RFK. And they think, yeah, let's get this guy in charge of things. Let's go. And if he goes in there and starts like, first of all, I don't know how much slack Trump is going to give him to just ban these products and piss off all of like the Republican rich donors. I have serious doubts he's just going to let RFK do whatever the fuck he wants. But even if he did, are Republican voters going to like that when they go to the store? And it's like, wait a second, why does this cost $3 more? It's like, well, he wanted them to make it without these preservatives and extra chemicals or whatever. Like this is where you go with that. And again, like I think like the big problem in terms of obesity is that Americans are just eating too many calories. It's not high fructose corn syrup versus sugar. It's that people are eating too many calories. That's why people are overweight. And I don't know what is RFK going to do about that.
Maybe make it so that less calorie dense foods are more cost competitive with the calorie dense garbage that you could eat instead.
Well, we'll see I thought Republicans were the party of like free market capitalism and choice. So they ripped Michelle Obama's head off when she introduced new healthier foods in schools. In fact, Trump actually got rid of her initiative on her birthday. I don't know if you remember this, but he did it, and I think it was in 2019. On her birthday, they rolled back these rules that were in place, banning like chocolate milk in school cafeterias. So I don't know. We'll see if I
hear you. I get your solid points. The Republicans are the party of free market capitalism. Why would they, but there's an incentive structure, I suspect, that is making these complex foods more expensive than the simple ones. And perhaps we can address that at a root cause. Maybe subsidize tomatoes. I don't know. Make my tomatoes cheaper. Just help me out here. And then you said something else I wanted to. Republicans are the party of free market. Republicans are the party of whatever Trump says they're the party of. I never thought they'd be pro-Russian 10 years ago, but Trump tells them to jump. They say how high. And now they're pro-Russia. Everybody, I'd rather be red than blue, right? I see the T-shirts they wear.
I get that. That's valid. But as soon as you start, we saw what voters did to Democrats because prices went up at grocery stores. And I do think there's a limit on how much sway you can have over your party. Like, I don't think Donald Trump is going to convince his voters to. So, for example, if gas prices went up $3, just for example, because of some policy that he pursued, I don't think he's going to be able to convince his voters like, well, actually, this is a good thing. They're going to be pissed. And similarly, I think if they go to the store and they see inflation, which is what will happen if especially if they do mass deportations and tariffs, then I do think like there's going to be a limit to he's never going to lose maybe 20% of the country. Like, they're really rabidly in support of him, but he can be chipped away at the edges if he fucks with people's wallet too much. So I personally don't see a lot of silver lining to a second Trump presidency. The only thing I can think of is that if it just provokes like meaningful change, if it makes the pendulum swing to the left again, then I guess that's silver lining, right? So if we just stomp him out in 2026, then that would be good news. But
the new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, I guess we're calling it, with Vivek and Elon Musk. For all Elon Musk's flaws, like rabid lying, he cut expenses at Twitter. Now, I know Twitter has its flaws and such, but prior to the election, there was a thing that came out. America was paying like 80,000% markup for soap dispensers on military airplanes and washers. Washers being the thing that goes on a nut, not like a dishwasher or whatever.
Yeah.
And an 80,000% markup. And my friend Taylor from the show, he thinks it's because there's like somebody in South Carolina hooked up with Lindsey Graham getting a kickback, and that's a viable theory. Mine is that these guys aren't measured based on being like cost effective, right? They don't look at ROI in the government. They just say, did you get the soap dispensers to this guy that he needed? Yes. Did you pay 80,000 times too much? I don't care. That's not my problem. That's Woody's problem. He's the one that pays taxes. Our job is to get soap dispensers on the airplanes. And since you did it, you're a hero and we got you. With people like Elon and Vivek looking at costs in the government, then maybe we get rid of I'm going to make up a number, 70% of people who aren't working very hard or who are overspending. Like, let's find waste in government because there's a lot of it.
The issue that I have there is, so first of all, like, you can find examples of successful companies that Elon's been a part of. Obviously, Tesla and SpaceX are cool companies. Twitter is not the company to point to, because he has like the value of Twitter as a company has plummeted on his watch. It's true. He did cut a lot of administrative costs with getting rid of employees and stuff like that. But the product, I would argue, has suffered greatly. There's a lot of like functionality that's still just super wobbly, I guess we'll say it. And the site itself is just rapidly devolving into a 4chan forum, and it's become really toxic to political advertisers. You used to see like General Motors and Coca-Cola and like really big brands advertise on Twitch, and now it's like literally like penis pumps and stuff like that. But the other thing to consider is like, when we look at someone who's trying to cut costs in a company, there's a point to that, right? Like you have this fiduciary responsibility. Like your job is to extract the most amount of profit as possible from these companies. And when we're talking about government institutions, that's not the function of these institutions. So you'll hear about Republicans like, well, we take a loss on the post office, which is the most ridiculous fucking thing I've ever heard of in my life. It's a public service of like, where it's not there to make a profit. And similarly, Department of Education is not there to make a profit. The Department of Energy is not there to make a profit. These agencies are meant to serve the American people, and through regulation, through enforcement of the laws, and through support, federal funds, like these kinds of things. And so, like, I mean, sure, if like in theory, if you can cut people that aren't contributing a lot, then I guess in theory that's fine. But I think just in principle, going in there with this goal of cutting 70%, when someone like Vivek and Elon have no experience in a government bureaucracy, like I don't even understand why they would set that as a goal before they're even very familiar with what these agencies do. It just seems a bit silly to me.
I don't know if you've ever worked in like a cube farm environment, but I've spent a lot of time in that, like 2 decades. And I'm telling you, something like, I'll make it up, 60, 70% of the people are doing 90% of the work. And 30% of them are doing nothing. In the government, I have friends in the government, that flips. Something like 30% of the people are doing 90% of the work, and 70% are just not doing anything. There aren't enough threats for them to do their job. They just sit there and coast forever. And whether it be the purchasing from the subcontractors or the actual employees, there's inefficiencies in the government. And if I'm looking for silver linings, and I am, maybe they can find those.
Maybe. I don't have a lot of faith in Vivek and Elon. I think that Elon is, I think it's kind of insane that Republicans have been complaining about someone like George Soros, who donates, millions of dollars each election cycle to help progressive, district attorneys and political candidates get over the finish line. And they call this like overt corruption. They say it's evil. And then in comes Elon Musk, literally the richest man in the world, who bought a social media platform, used it explicitly to help Republicans, when at the time that he bought it, he said, in order for Twitter to be 100%, what did he say? He said, in order for Twitter to be a valuable good to the public, it needs to be politically neutral. That's out the fucking window. And then now you have somebody who is on the receiving end of government subsidies for all of his companies, and you're going to give him a position of influence in the agencies that are supposed to regulate his companies?
It's problematic. He's a military contractor meeting with Putin, right? What world are we living in? Exactly. I get it. I have lots of issues with Elon and what he might do, but gosh, they can't be all bad, right? They must do something that's good that we want to carry on after Trump leaves.
Well, again, I mean, I don't think that everything that Elon does is bad. I like SpaceX as a company. I have a Tesla. It's a really nice car. I take it on road trips. It's great. It's a great product. But I'm not comfortable with him being involved in the government in the way that he is now. And it just seems like Republicans have no principles on this because it's so obviously corrupt. I mean, let's talk about the fact that Republicans in the House for the last 2 years have been investigating the Biden family, desperately trying to find any link between Joe Biden and his brother and his son's businesses. They were setting up this narrative of the Biden crime family. So, Hunter was going into Ukraine and extracting millions of dollars from this Ukrainian energy company and then filtering it back to his dad. And they were trying to set up a narrative, same too, with one of Biden's brothers who does international business dealings and whatnot. They never produced an ounce of evidence that any of that money got back to Biden. They investigated for 2 years, didn't find any of that. And now Donald Trump is going to go back into the White House, and there's no expectation that he should divest from his companies while he's president. He is going to be, just like he was for the first term, he is going to, quote unquote turn control over the country of his companies over to his kids, which is just bullshit. He's just going to tell his kids what to do or whatever.
Right.
So the fact, like, he's going to be actively profiting from his companies while he's in office. So like,
he's already using like official government accounts to pimp somebody's book. Was it his son's book? I think it might have been Don Jr.'s, and that's illegal. And Trump's family is like, I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 100, like 100 corrupt. But Biden's family was 10 corrupt. And I hate that people can both sides of this issue, because there is no reason they should have hired Hunter Biden to be a Ukrainian energy consultant or whatever his job was. That was crooked. They were paying him to try to get influence from Joe Biden.
They never produced any evidence that any influence occurred.
Prove that it worked, right? That they couldn't prove that they got their money's worth, but that is what they were trying to buy. And I feel like if we completely deny the reality of that, then we're not being honest.
No, there were people in the Obama administration that expressed frustration at the time, because when Hunter Biden got that job, he was still VP. And people within Obama's administration, his advisors told him, like, this is a bad look. We don't like this. But he just did what he did.
The chat says I'm both sidesing right now, and they're right. Like, I take your criticism. I don't know how to be intellectually honest and not both sides it just a little. I tried to do it with that 100 versus 10% corrupt thing. I guess I didn't land it. I get it, right? What Hunter did is not as bad as what Trump does. What Jared Kushner does, taking billions from the Saudis, and he hasn't turned a profit for them, right? This is a very profitable economy. Everybody's making money right now, but Jared Kushner's not with the Saudi investments that he's getting. Somehow that's okay. There is a both sides here. They're just not the same. They're not claiming they're equal. I just want to be spotless so that we can point at the other guy's dirty clothes and laugh without them looking at ours.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I want to switch things up a little bit and talk to you about a little meme that's come up with the PKA crowd, because they filter into my mentions. They harp on the mutilated thing. You remember when we had that conversation? Gosh. Yeah.
Yes. And at the time I was like, they're over focusing on this mutilated word, but you were right. I have hit it back about the police officer who lost his eye, and another one broke a rib. If you don't call a lost eye mutilated, what are we doing here? Like, you're the people being intellectually dishonest, because Hutch was right. And I don't know if you've seen me defend it since then. If that's made it a problem. Okay. But I looked into it, and he got mutilated. What I can't find is exactly how it happened. Was he hit with a fire extinguisher? I think I saw something about a flagpole used as a spear. I don't know exactly how the eye injury occurred, but losing an eye is mutilated. Hutch is right. Boom.
Right. Yeah. So like and it made me think, like, so I imagine you did the same thing I did, which is, did you watch, like, you probably watched a lot of the January 6th Select Subcommittee, right?
As much as I could, yeah. I watched them make fun of the Republicans. It was a little bit of a show, but yeah. Wow.
But there's also New York Times actually put together a 45-minute video called The Day of Rage. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, they like sequenced lots of, like, I don't know, Twitter videos and stuff to sort of, like, all the available footage at the time. It came out pretty quick, like it came out years ago, and they showed it in sequence to sort of tell a story of how it went down based on crowdsourced footage. Yeah, I think I saw it.
Right. So they had footage from, like, CCTV, or like security footage from inside the Capitol, and they also had a lot of footage that people took from their phones that day, and they, exactly like you said, they put together this footage in a timeline to show how the events of that day unfolded. And so, like, I just have this theory. I can't prove it. And it honestly kind of surprised me, but now looking back, it seems kind of stupid to be surprised by it. But I feel like a lot of right wingers intentionally avoided watching that stuff. And I feel like a lot of your PKA audience and Taylor specifically, and definitely Dick Masterson, just like legit, like, have no idea what actually happened that day. And they legitimately, like, Taylor hinted that he legitimately thinks that it was like, oh, they let grandma come in and take selfies in the Capitol, and the police just let him in, and it wasn't that bad.
I think that Republicans and to some extent my co-hosts, maybe they do what we do during the BLM on both sides. And I'm sorry, I can't do this better. A lot of people weren't there to overthrow the government. They were just there to protest. But some of them were, right? Some of them were very much trying to prevent the vice president from ratifying the vote or certifying the vote.
Yeah.
That was their goal, and they succeeded by delaying it. They took over the Capitol, which to me is like sacred hallowed ground. They smeared poop on the walls.
Yeah.
They stole the podium. They were disrespecting Pelosi's office, and I get that Pelosi's a curse word to the right, but he's still the Speaker of the House at the time, and you're not supposed to be in there messing with her stuff. Our elected representatives shouldn't be scared, cowering from a mob taking over. And Fox News shows them obeying the velvet ropes again and again and again. That irritates me, right? Like, imagine I had surveillance footage inside the home where a son murdered his mom. I could show you hours and hours of footage of him not murdering his mom.
Right.
That doesn't make him innocent,
Yes,
right?
yes.
All I need is that one clip of a cop getting his smashed in the doorway. I need that woman, Ashley Babbitt, trying to break into the floor and getting shot in the face, I think, right? Like, these bad things happen. Just because there were other people who didn't knock over the velvet ropes, that doesn't mean this wasn't a violent attempted coup, which is the way that I see it.
And they're
just choosing their news.
And they were literally mutilated like that. When we look up the word mutilated, we're talking about like shocking violence and permanent disfigurement. There was a officer who lost the tip of his right index finger. Others were smashed in the head with baseball bats, flagpoles, and pipes. Another lost consciousness after rioters used a metal barrier to push her into stairs as they tried to reach the Capitol steps. Capitol assault resulted in one of the worst days of injuries for law enforcement in the United States since September 11th, 2001. About 140 officers, 73 from the Capitol Police, 65 from the Metropolitan Police Department of Washington were injured, the departments have said. They range from bruises and lacerations to more serious damage such as concussions, rib fractures, burns, even a mild heart attack. So I don't know, like I'm not going to tell people what kind of humor. Like, I don't police people's sense of humor. I don't police people's language. I don't tell people like what kind of jokes they should or shouldn't make. There's certain things that I don't make jokes about, but I don't impose that on other people. So if you want to use dark humor to talk about any event, January 6th included, fuck it. As long as it's witty and funny, then sure, you can make comedy out of everything. But there does seem to be an enormous chunk of, if not all of them, like MAGA enthusiasts that have no fucking idea what actually happened that day. Like, just have no fucking clue what actually happened that day. And I have to believe that they intentionally, I have to believe that they either consciously or unconsciously avoided seeing the violent images and footage from that day.
Right? I made this call 20 years ago that turned out to be so wrong. I was excited about what the internet would do to our political process.
Same.
I looked at someone like Jon Stewart calling out hypocrisy, right? Like how they loved Trump meeting with North Korea, but hated Obama meeting with North Korea, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, when the internet becomes big, that's going to happen like crazy. It's going to become impossible for politicians to lie because there will be 100 million Jon Stewarts calling them out on that all the time. This is where I thought the internet was going.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. What actually happened is people get to choose their own news source. And half of America chose Tim Pool, right? Literally a paid Russian asset. And they're like, no, I want this fucking bald denialist to be my news source. I want Dave Rubin to be my news source. Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, all these people who were not committed to truth become the places where they like to get informed. And shucks, I wish it went the other way.
Well, I think in retrospect, it seems kind of silly that we had these naive notions that the internet would lead to this new age of enlightenment. But I had the same thoughts. Like back then I thought, oh, it's going to be so much harder to lie to people. Like I thought about marijuana, for example. I was like, it's going to be so much harder for like people who are committed to marijuana staying illegal. It's going to be so much harder for them to keep that going when people can just pull out their phone and they have, 4,000 years of recorded history at their fingertips with high-speed internet. And what's naive in retrospect is like, we should have seen the profit motive coming in at some point. And back then we didn't see it as much. So like when you and I got into making videos or whatever, that was still so new. Like we were literally on the ground floor for making money doing Call of Duty videos. Cause before that, I don't know if you were making videos before the,
Especially you. No, I was inspired by you. My podcast was too. Like, that's just how it happened.
Well, okay, so yeah, but there were like a group of us, like Hector and Blame Truth and X Calzors and me and we were just fucking doing it just to fucking do it. It was like, oh, this is cool, man. I have 10,000 subscribers. This is awesome. And there was no money involved. And then as soon as money got involved, you know, everything kind of changed. And now when we look at like the successful influencers now, it's all very like fake pranks, and it's all very algorithm friendly. And so human beings they're gonna figure out how to optimize these things. And when alternative media covers news and politics, they're gonna optimize in the same way. And I think the way that happens is they figure out, okay, well, if I make a video about Fauci, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get like 150,000 views on this. But if I make a video about like Deborah Birx, maybe only 30,000. So they're going to go for the Fauci thing. And so there's this kind of spiral that creators go down with their audiences. On the left, you can point to Hassan and say that Hassan has said things, it radicalized his audience, and then he knows that his audience is radicalized. And so he, whether consciously or unconsciously, becomes even more radicalized. And so they just kind of go down the spiral, and it's you call it audience capture. But that happens all over now. And there are just, you know, Destiny talks about this a lot. I've talked about this a lot in the last few years as well. Is like, there are no guardrails for alternative media. You were talking about people getting their information from Tim Pool and Joe Rogan instead of Dana Bash and Anderson Cooper now. And that is the way that the world is going. But there are no layers of accountability in alternative media. If they get a story wrong, who gives a fuck? Their audience doesn't care. Their sponsors don't care. The YouTube isn't looking for people that are correct before they run ads on those videos. And so they have every incentive to give viewers what they want rather than talk about things that are actually happening. And
it's an issue. When Dan Rather was wrong about some letter regarding George Bush's,
he was wrong about his service in the National Guard. Yeah, exactly.
In the National Guard. Yeah. There was if people don't know, someone gave him a letter that turned out to be fake, and he reported it as if it was true. Right. And there's a really good movie about that with that's a really good movie about that with what's the she played Hela in God of War Ragnarok. She's just unreasonably attractive. Kate something. What's her name, guys? And then Robert Redford played Kate Blanchett, and Robert Redford played Dan Rather. There's a good movie about that, but go on. Yeah. So back then, if you got something wrong like that, it was a real problem and it was terrible for your career. Now, shucks. If you get it wrong, but I like it anyway, then people applaud you for telling that lie. Yeah. Do you watch Breaking Points, the podcast news show on YouTube?
I sometimes review it on my channel. Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad.
I watch it almost every day. And you might know the very end of their videos, it wraps up with like, you know, hey, we're an alternative to the failing news media. And one of the things they fuss about is the revenue model for people like Fox, CNN, etc. CNN gets most, or nearly most, I think most of its revenue through these cable carrying fees. So people like Time Warner, Cox, etc., pay CNN for the privilege of airing their content, right? Without content, who would buy cable? Cool. Well, it turns out that I think that revenue model is more resistant to audience capture than the YouTube revenue model. When you're on YouTube, you're daily, like, how did that thing go about talking about Fauci? How did that thing go talking about Debbie Wasserman Schultz? You know, oh shit, we got to talk about Fauci more. Right. Every time I have Biden humiliated in the title, my video does well. So now we're going to put that in the title every week. CNN isn't under that same day-to-day pressure because they have cable carrying fees providing the revenue for their show. Right. That's a better model than the audience capture rat hole that people use now.
Well, any good lie, there's always a kernel of truth, right? So like immigration's a really good example. It's true that the border situation was untenable. That's true. What's not true is that there's these bands of cannibals that are coming into the country by the thousands and, raping people's daughters and murdering people and stuff like that. And when it comes to the media, critique of the media, there are problems with corporate funded media. There are influences that you could call corrupt, but the standards in place, even in places like fucking Fox News, is actually so much better than what we have on alternative media, because on alternative media, there are, like I said, no standards, none whatsoever.
At least Fox News has to cough up $1 billion when they lie about, who won the election.
Yeah, just about $1 billion. It was like $750 million settlement. And that's the other thing. Like, even Fox News didn't suffer any kind of consequences from that. Most people probably don't even know about the Dominion suit. It was the largest civil settlement in American litigation history. And through these text messages, it became very obvious that Fox knowingly was lying, and especially Tucker Carlson. So in the morning, he'd be texting his friends saying Donald Trump is literally a demon. And we now know that he means that literally. He believes in demons and that stuff.
Well, he's got the evidence. He was scratched in his bed. Hutch, right. Come on.
He was calling Donald Trump a literal demon. He was saying that Sidney Powell was this crazy bitch who was insane and making stuff up. And then he would go on his program and talk about releasing the Kraken and talk about voter fraud, blah, blah, blah. And he was asked to resign because of that settlement. And then he started this alternative media career. And now he's this pro-Trump guy, and they don't give a fuck. He was calling Donald Trump we know what he thinks about him in private. Tucker Carlson thinks he's a fucking demon. And he didn't pay any price for it whatsoever. He was he was forgiven right away just because he tells people what they want to hear. Not that it's true. He feeds into people's narratives and cognitive biases. Yes.
I look at Tucker's speech pattern, and it's basically he sets up a shaky premise. Kamala Harris is not a serious person, right? That's the shaky premise. And then he can just build on top of that. So by that, I assumed that the Ukraine war was never going to happen because they sent Kamala there. And you wouldn't send a non-serious person to Ukraine. So this is what happened. And he just outlines this whole thing that the Ukraine war was never supposed to happen, that Russia wasn't going to invade, and all these things he got wrong. He got wrong because she's not a serious person. He does it again and again. Shaky premise, build on top of it, and acts like he's right. And it's very frustrating to watch. But he's an effective communicator.
I want to ask you before, I got to go do a podcast in about 9 minutes here, but I wanted to ask you about, because I know you fucking care about the outcome of the election. Yes. How do you keep your host hat on and what's the question I'm trying to ask? Do you understand where I'm getting at with this? You were I was pretty devastated by this election, but what I don't do is fire up the stream and just talk for 4 hours about how I feel devastated. Number one, because I don't think it helps anything. Number two, I don't want these motherfuckers to see me devastated.
I went in the other direction, kind of. I was all right, I lost. I need to give the victors their flowers. And I on my show, I think I used the words I lost and I cared. and that's all true. And I thought Kamala was going to win. I got so freaking encouraged by that Ann Seltzer poll coming out of Iowa. I watched the Bulwark. I never watched them before this election cycle, but they seem to be subject matter experts, former Republicans. And who's Tim, the one that wears the puka shells? I forget his last
Miller.
name.
He's really good.
Yeah, seems like a really smart guy. Well, the first time he saw it, he thought that Kamala was losing by 3. And he was very excited. The idea that she was that close in Iowa, losing by only 3.
No.
Says
she was ahead by 3 in the Seltzer poll.
I'm aware, but I'm getting
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
He was under the impression she was down by 3. And that was great news. And he extrapolated from that she's going to win Pennsylvania. She's going to win Michigan. She's going to win maybe Ohio. Who knows? And then he found out she was ahead by 3, not down. And it was, this is such great news. He was so excited. So I'm watching this and I'm getting excited. I have this Woodyism that polls are delayed by, say, 10 to 14 days, right? So if a big thing happens, then that will be reflected in the poll in 10 to 14 days. So as the election approaches, the best we can do is find out what people thought 2 weeks ago and extrapolate the trend from there. So I thought Kamala rising in the polls coming to election day, man, when we actually count the real votes, she's got this locked up. So back to your question, I kind of was like, I guess I was in a bubble. I guess I was wrong. I really do aspire to get news sources from the left and the right and to understand the truth, which is hard to get at now. And then also where people who disagree with me are coming from. But, you know, I gave them their flowers. Like, I guess I fouled this up. I guess I didn't have my finger on the pulse like I tried to, because Trump won. Now, he won by 1.7%. Knock it off with your mandate nonsense, but he won.
But when you're joking around with your co-hosts, is there like you just kind of pushing that fear down and just and or are you just rolling with it? Is that serious laughter, or are you consciously trying to push your real concerns down? Because I genuinely do think that he is a threat to democracy, if not an immediate threat, but you don't want someone stress testing our institutions. You know what I mean? Like
my personal self-evaluation, I don't know if you see it the same way, is that I push back when I think they're factually incorrect, but when it's opinion-based or clearly a joke, maybe a joke with a kernel of truth or hope in it, that slides by. Also, if I get triggered by everything I disagree with, one, that's a bad show, and two, I feel like it invalidates the next time I'm triggered, right? If I get triggered 97 times a show, then it's not a very serious event. Yep. If I push back, it should be like, okay, wait a minute, this one is a bridge too far.
No, I agree. Like when you're doing content, especially covering political content, if you're just constantly triggered, like some people do that and they have their audience of people that are just constantly triggered, and I've never seen the appeal in that. I don't like having like internal chaos. And so I've consciously been, and I think part of it is just like getting older, but I've been learning how to pick my battles a lot more in the last few years. And yeah, it takes effort. Like when you're doing your regular stream or your show or whatever, and you're seriously concerned about things, but you have to kind of put on a face a little bit. It's tricky, you know. I watch you do it with those boys, and I know that you care about these issues. And I'm not saying that, I'm not necessarily even talking shit about Taylor or Kyle or even Dick, because like if we won, bro, I was gonna get so petty with it. Like I was gonna like as hard as Dick Masterson is going in the paint right now, I probably would have matched that energy and then some. Like I was really ready. And so there is an element of
Did you hear that he brought you up on our show last week? Did it make its way to you?
Yeah, people told me to watch the clip, and so I watched it. I guess he was tweeting at me. I didn't even look at my mentions for like the first 3 days after the election because I knew it was just going to be a shit show. So I missed his epic moments, but
oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw it, but I stood up for you. I pointed out his hypocrisy, but he handled it in a funny way. He did a good job.
His thing is like, he does the thing that I think like Rogan even does to a certain degree, which is where you sort of I feel like some people like hide behind their humor and their comedy because you never have to take a serious stance on anything. Like I was pushing him when I went on the podcast with him, with you guys on serious issues. I was trying to get like serious answers out of him. And there are just no good answers to these questions. Like when you ask, like, how do you feel about Donald Trump watching this for 3 hours before asking people to go while cops were literally being mutilated? There's no way that you can cope your way through that. And so the only way to get through it is to just and like do the whole, you know, showman thing and try to hide behind comedy. And so, you know, like I get it. I understand where it comes from, but.
Yeah, it's hard to win a debate when the facts aren't on your side. And I think that's the position he was in for January 6th. And, he responded by, I don't know, attempting to troll, I guess I could say. Yeah. And it's content. Yeah.
Well, hey, it's good talking to you, man. It's a different kind of setting when it's just you and me, brother.
Yeah, tomorrow I'll get beat up again by the 2v1.
That's what happened. Like this is what it is to lose an election and to more importantly acknowledge that you lost. Because when MAGA lost, they didn't have to go through what we're going through because they just fucking coped their way through it and said there was fraud. But this is what it is to lose elections, and you get older and you experience more elections and you experience more losses, and this is the time where we just eat shit for a little bit. That's it. And it's going to be a honeymoon
That's what
phase.
I've been doing.
It's going to be a honeymoon phase for Trump. He's going to get like, 50-55% approval for the first, few months. And then we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, that's just.
I know you're rapping. If I could just get in there real quick.
Yeah.
The Gates thing, I feel like, is already burning Trump to some extent. Where are the people who screamed grooming for the last 6 years? Where's Marjorie Taylor Greene, who showed condoms at CVS and said, look at this, CVS is grooming your children?
That's not
Where are the people who screamed
Trump
about Comet Pizza? Now he's literally taking a pedophile and trying to make him attorney general. And I think it's his first stain. This is our crowd sides are the biggest we've ever seen Sean Spicer moment. Like, it's begun already.
I don't think that is going to, first of all, I don't think that's going to hurt him. But if it does hurt him, I don't think it's going to happen until the confirmation hearings. Because it's going to, Gates is going to have to sit there and be grilled by, really capable Democratic senators who are going to come at him with the heat, like Klobuchar is a fucking bulldog and Cory Booker is a fucking bulldog at these things. So I think it'll be leaked before then. I think the House, the investigation that they have into him, that report will be leaked. I mean, we all have already heard that 2 different girls have testified to visually seeing him banging the 17-year-old. That's a bad look. I've been following this thing for 4 years now, maybe longer, like when it first happened. And it really hasn't gotten mainstream attention until now. I bet I wonder if Matt Gaetz is regretting his decision to go for AG. Sure, it was a way out of the House, which maybe is a way for the Ethics Committee not to release their findings. But my goodness, he is the top story in America, the fact that he's a pedo. I think that's cope. I don't think it's going to hurt Trump. I mean, if anything, I think maybe it hurts Gaetz if he doesn't get through. I mean, obviously it hurts Gaetz if he doesn't get through, but it's not going to tarnish Trump whatsoever. He's not going to lose any support for that, I don't think. We'll see. You could be right. But, I'm starting to believe in the Teflon Don thing. I really am. No one event is going to pierce the Teflon Don thing, but I mean, heck, maybe it's worse if Gaetz does get the job, and then it'll just continue to be this like poison that ticks away at his health. Maybe his political health. We'll see. All right, I know you need to go, and I think my dinner's ready. So, all right, man. It was good talking to you. Thanks so much, man. Yeah, man. Take it easy. Good luck.